Oi, oi, it's your boy, the Muad'Dib of underrating Habib, Jack Slack. And it's the Jack Slack podcast, and we're talking about UFC 267, which went off as an absolute banger. And I was furious because it was so good. I was furious at the people over the last 4 weeks who've been going, no. Fight nights have always been like this. You know, this is just UFC. And you're like, no, I remember they were good cards one day a while ago. And this is what, this is the thing. Like, those same dickheads will be like, you can't tell how good a card's going to be by looking at it ahead of time. And you're like, well, no, yeah, obviously, the biggest cans in the world could come out and have a night of barn burners out of nowhere. But if you put together good matchups between top quality fighters, we know to expect good fights from them. And everyone knew these fights were going to be good, and they were. So you got, 40, 50 minutes of me jizz in my pants over these fights coming up. So get ready. But I'm trying to think if there's anything to moan about. I'll find something midway through, I'm sure. But why don't we start from... Well, my favourite was obviously Jan versus Sandhagen, because obviously that was going to be my favourite. But why don't we start from the top with Teixeira versus Blachowicz, because it's a good, well, a feel-good fight, but also not. Because we all liked Jan Blachowicz. He was already doing what Glover Teixeira was about to do, the feel-good, put it together at the end of your career sort of fighter. But then he sort of got one-upped because Glover Teixeira is even further into his career, and he managed to pull it off. This is the thing, like last week on the Boycast, and again, go subscribe, get in on the Boycast. But what I was saying was, Glover Teixeira is so far removed on the feet from Israel Adesanya, but I think that against the weird pokey reach for parries and awkwardly kick style of Jan Blachowicz, I think, what I said was I think Glover's honesty might help him. It's such a straightforward style. He came into the UFC with 3 things. He still does those 3 things. He doesn't do an awful lot else. There's not an awful lot of good jabbing, barely kicks. Really, it's just that slip inside, overhand right, the cross counter. It's a cross counter if the guy jabs. If it's not, it's just leading with an overhand and then coming back with the left hook afterwards. And the honesty of that, I think, I thought could carry him into the fight, could make it an uglier fight than, a consensus better kickboxer got out of Blachowicz in Adesanya. But we're going to be doing the whole, styles make fights thing to death with the Sandhagen Jan fight. But, there was nothing sneaky about what Glover did here. He's a big, strong guy. He's a powerful guy. He can take a horrendous beating, which is what we've been watching him do repeatedly through this second run at the title. And he did that. He went forward in the first round, got Blachowicz to the fence, took him down. Was it against the fence? I can't remember. But he basically ended up in closed guard for the whole of the first round. And my response was to tweet, well, people probably needed to calm down after that Jan Sandhagen fight anyway. But... it was a good way to get started. He wasn't really able to elbow effectively or do any work. Teixeira has had a lot of success with a very basic grappling game. I'm saying basic, I mean straightforward. I'm not saying like anyone could do it. He's been in like ADCC against guys like Cyborg and gone the distance with them. So he's a very competent grappler. But what he mainly does is like single leg, half guard transition to mount, smash them with elbows, get the arm triangle. But in this one, he ended up in closed guard for ages, just trying to use the can opener. And the can opener is, I think a lot of fighters used to use it as a crutch. You see it as like, guys like GSP used to use it, and John Jones used it as basically anyone who worked with Greg Jackson used it as like their intermediary position. You get the can opener, you keep your elbows tight and you keep your knees by their hips so they can't angle out and armbar you. And then you turn over elbows from there, you're always elbowing in front, with one elbow into the other hand and the head's in between. So you're never going to have trouble aiming. And Greg Jackson did an interesting series on Fanatics about ground and pound. But yeah, I was very surprised. Well, I don't know if I should be surprised because like Blachowicz isn't a great bottom player, and Glover Teixeira has great top control. So it was, yeah, not a complete stalemate because Teixeira was working, but you could see that Blachowicz couldn't get up and just got stuck there and awkwardly grimacing and squirming during can opener attempts, and then getting sort of clipped with elbows and punches, but not really like brutalized. And then the second round starts, and Blachowicz looks out of it. He looked absolutely knackered, and Teixeira kept walking him down, kept picking up the single, and Blachowicz would like have to turn his back and limp leg out and run away. And basically, and to be honest, there was another thing that I liked that Teixeira was doing. He was poking with the odd jab, but he was also, instead of throwing the right hand across the top and then coming back with the left hook, he was throwing right hands to the body and then coming up with the left hook. And that mixed well with these constant level changes for the single. And by just plodding forward and doing the same two things over and over again, he managed to draw the same sort of honesty out of Blachowicz. There wasn't much feinting. He wasn't wheeling off very well. He was going back on straight lines and jabbing every time he thought Teixeira was stepping in. And then when he bit down on his gum shield and he tried to trade, Teixeira would come up and bang him with the left hook. I remember him looking a lot more rattled the first time I watched it live, and then I watched it again, and he didn't look quite as rattled, but he looked very... he was having a lot of trouble with just that two-prong threat from Teixeira. And Teixeira ducks in on a single leg along the fence, and Jan Blachowicz tries to like get behind him for a standing rear naked choke, and you're like, this isn't Devin Clark, mate. This isn't, consistently the finish I rank as the most embarrassing finish in a professional high-level MMA fight ever. You are not going to standing rear naked choke Glover Teixeira when he ducks on your hips. And Glover just like pops his head out, drops Blachowicz to the mat, mounted over the legs very, very quickly, and then Blachowicz basically turned his back to try and get to all fours and got flattened out and short choked. The tap was really, really quick, and of course that means that everyone accuses him of being a quitter or something like that. It was suspiciously quick. My reaction was like, did he fuck up his back on or his neck or his ribs on being bellied down, or did it happen earlier when he was being can opened constantly? When you see things like that, when guys are just very quick to tap, it's normally because they're in real danger. They're in the kind of scary pain. Things like horrible neck pain and horrible back pain, where toughened fighters are still scared of that because it's like, oh, I could be paralyzed for life or something. Obviously you're not going to turn out to be, probably, but guys do still worry about that if they get like really bad back pulls or neck pulls. It's instinctive. However, yeah, amazing for Glover Teixeira. Really good, feel-good story. And, he didn't have to round out his game to do it. He just had to do the same three things over and over again. Respect, my man. Corey Anderson had some fun thoughts on this, because of course he did. Said Jan was too focused on him. Like, why would you be? He's in Bellator. And that Glover Teixeira handled his lightweight. And also that anyone can get caught with a big shot. It's more impressive to dominate someone for 3 rounds or whatever it was. Because basically, he beat Glover Teixeira back in 2018. But 6 months before that, he was getting humiliated by Jimmy Manuwa and Ovin Simprou. And before that, he was getting split decisioned by Mauricio Hua, who had been washed for the best part of 10 years at that point. But that's the Bellator playbook. You go to Bellator, and then you constantly bring up people in the UFC. The old Patricio Pitbull special. Anyway, what else was good on this card? Well, everything. I say what else was good on this card every time, and pretty much everything was. Let's do co-main event, because I loved it. And to be honest, this was one of those fights where my eyes were blurring over because I was enjoying it so much, and there was so much going on in every fucking exchange. Few takeaways. Sandhagen did well in the first round, obviously, but obviously Jan's a slow starter, but that's probably not by choice. The amount of hand fighting going on as both switched stances was remarkable. So you had Jan, when he was in an open stance, regardless of what leg he was on, he's fighting the lead hand with his lead hand. And then the same when they're in a closed stance, but fighting across himself with his lead hand. That cross hand checking we were talking about the other day. The downside is While he's doing that, and because he's also like framing over his opponent's shoulder when they step in, he does have his fucking fingers splayed and pointed at his opponent's eyes a lot of the time. And you're like, well, you are avoiding the eye poke quite well. It doesn't happen that much anymore, but please, can we not do that? Yeah, a couple of things that I really loved in this fight. Yes, Sandhagen getting to the body with his body hooks, because, he's got the best jab to left hook to the body in the biz. And Jan really got to work countering that almost immediately. It was very clear that he was prepared for that. If nothing else, he was like, yep, not letting that go for free. So every time that Sandhagen hit him with a body shot, he'd come back with a lead hook and a rear straight, like counter combination upstairs immediately. Because that's the thing about the hook to the body. Yes, there's an advantage to being a really long fighter and hooking to the body. Look at someone like Gerald McClellan, but you are still giving up a lot of that reach. It's not like you're jabbing or throwing the right straight. When you watched so many of those, when Corey's lancing at him with jabs and straights, he'll pull straight back and Jan will swing and miss past him. When he's committing to the body, he has to go to the body. He has to get to the inside, has to step in close enough that Jan can crack him in the head. So I liked that. That was really cool. And throughout the fight, there was a lot of Jan trying to capitalize on someone who's very hard to get back at because he's very long and moving well. So, that's where you saw a couple of those. He'd take a punch and then he'd swing, miss, spin through on the back fist and then catch him. And that was very cool. The one that knocked him down, I think it was the third round, he swings and misses, steps through on the back fist, and then throws another left hand on top of that from southpaw now. It was like a pro wrestling thing, it was spinning back fist into lariat. But yeah, it worked. And then the last exchange of the fight, he spin through on... swung a left hook, spun through on a wheel kick, I think it was, like Frankie Edgar used to do. Except Frankie Edgar used to do it at the air, a foot in front of his opponent, whereas Jan's actually stepping in and getting the guy on the fence to do it. Liked the body shots from both men in this one. Jan was going to the body a lot more. You saw Jan kicking the legs a lot more than he does normally because Corey was getting on that early. And obviously to slow down someone's mobility, you want to go to their legs. This is the thing we're always saying, like when you're fighting someone like Israel Adesanya, Dominic Cruz, get them towards the fence and kick their fucking legs when they circle out because they have to pick a direction. And that's when you can catch them because their legs are on rails. It's between you and the fence and they're in kicking distance the entire time. I think one of the things that you noticed in this fight was because Aldo had so much success kicking out Jan's body. And when I say success, I mean he hammered his body quite well when Jan originally went southpaw. Just to recap, because if you didn't hear the last podcast, or the Filthy Casual's Guide to Petr Yan, which you should definitely watch, Jan struggled with Aldo's jab and right low kick from an orthodox position. So he switched to southpaw so that his lead hand covered Aldo's lead hand, complicating his jab, and so that the low kick was going into the inside of his shin, which isn't a great target compared to like free calf kicks and kicks to the back of the hamstring. But when he switched to southpaw, Aldo started throwing his right leg as a body kick. And when I say successful, he hit him a lot with it early, and then Jan started cross-checking it, which meant picking up the lead leg really high to try and block it, and that kept Jan off him for a lot of the fight. I think one of the problems that Corey had in this fight, and one of the reasons he wasn't able to go to the body kicks more effectively, he did well with a nice poking teep. He was doing the jiri teep, which is where you wave your right hand and then you slam in the push kick with your right leg instead, which is similar to Jan's favourite body kick setup, which is to slap with whichever hand he's going to round kick in the ribs. So if he's throwing the left leg, he's stepping up into it. Left slap, left kick, or right slap, right kick. And the purpose of the slap is entirely to get the opponent to catch it on their hand so that their elbow comes up a bit. And he did it to Corey a couple of times in this fight too, but Corey had trouble body kicking, it seemed, because he was in movement almost the entire time or going backwards a lot of the time because Jan was pursuing him. One of the great advantages of going forward and pressuring someone is that it's very hard to kick effectively on the back foot. You have to really time your kicks well, and that gets even harder when you're dealing with a guy like Petr Yan, who, as we talked about in the Filthy Casual's Guide, loves catching and sweeping or tripping off kicks. Really doesn't let you get one for free. So Corey was sort of kept out of the body kicking a lot, and that's the thing. Like positioning and confidence are huge factors in body kicking. One of the reasons that Jorge Masvidal is one of the most active and successful body kickers in the sport is because he stops a really good takedown. For the most part, except against Usman because it's fucking Usman. But you could bring someone over with like the best body. Saenchai is not going to be able to body kick people if he transitions to MMA. It's the kick that basically puts you most at risk of being taken down, or bundled over, or punched up the middle. So Corey was locked out of those for a lot of the fight, which was very impressive. And that's another thing we're always talking about, like prettier kicking technique or better kicking mechanics does not mean that you will win kicking exchanges or win the kicking match. Kicking is, because it's so balance oriented and distance oriented, and you've got to control like two factors at the same time. You can't really kick while circling off and stuff like you could jab, because you've got so much to think about and control, and there's a big risk on each one you throw. It's more to do with like ring position. So guys like Dan Henderson and Petr Yan, his kicks aren't the prettiest, but he does get them off well because he's the guy who's always on the front foot. He's the guy always crowding his opponent, and he picks his spots. He gets guys circling into kicks. He gets guys when they're standing still. But if he were backing up and trying to fight off the back foot, he'd have a lot harder time using the kicks as effectively. And I think this is probably Jan's best kicking performance I've seen from him. I haven't seen all his ACA fights, but certainly the Magomedov ones and all of his UFC career. Like I don't think he's ever kicked as much as this, and to such a useful extent. I've always felt like his kicks are like, he sets up big kicks, whereas this one I felt like his kicks were part of a constantly moving forward, constantly building game. Corey was able to use the odd folding over elbow, which is something that we were very interested in because of Jan's high guard a lot of the time. But Jan did a lot of elbowing on his own right. Actually, there was a really nice one from Corey where he threw a jab and then went to throw the jab and stepped in with the elbow. Classic old Muay Thai basics, to be honest, but it was really nice to see him do it. You saw a lot of Corey using the whichever hand's in the back, so whichever is his rear. So let's say orthodox, he'd throw right straight, step through, right jab, and then left kick. He did those to the legs a couple of times. He was doing it with his hand too. A lot of Jan's best shots came on the shift. A lot of Jan's best shots actually come, if you look at his 1-2, it's a bit weird. Like he stands in a very short stance a lot of the time, and then he throws himself forward on the 1-2. Like he really leans. And a lot of the time he'll shift into a third punch, but a lot of the time he just sort of falls forward and catches himself. There were moments in this fight where, Glover Teixeira was doing it in the main event, but there were moments in this fight where Jan would move in on Sandhagen, back him up to the fence. Sandhagen would circle off, and Jan would catch himself with his hands on the fence. Like that's how forward he was throwing himself. But you saw it against Aldo. Like the distance he makes on those 1-2s surprises people because he really does throw himself into them. I think an important, like I said, we're going to get into the styles make fights stuff, but I saw some really like oversimplistic takes this week. I'm not going to say like stupid, but yeah, stupid. But people just being like, well, if Aljo, I'm going to have to say Sterling, because every time I say Aljo, people think I mean Aldo. If Sterling can jump on Sandhagen's back and easily choke him out in under 2 minutes, and Sterling got easily out-wrestled and grappled by Petr Yan, Petr Yan should have this one in the bag easy within the first 30 seconds. Just like extrapolate, everything to that point. But this is why we always say, like, the old saying is styles make fights, and I'm almost bored of saying it now. But like, the fight is an individual thing. You can build some knowledge of what how a fighter deals with certain things from previous fights, but so much of it is context and how it comes together. Like you watched Sterling just diving after takedowns. It was very obvious what he wanted from the get-go against Petr Yan. And against Sandhagen, he was able to quickly get him off his feet like that. But Sandhagen was the better takedown artist against Petr Yan, who's amazing at stopping takedowns. He had really good success just picking up these quick singles after going to the body, the little level changes, set up the easy level changes onto the takedown attempts. He was picking up singles, so not huge risk takedowns. Did get sprawled on a couple of times, but if you go down to your knees for a double leg, And we were talking about this with like Stipe Miocic versus Ngannou before their second fight happened. But like if you go down to your knees on a double leg, you get sprawled out. You're on the bottom on the front headlock, and the guy, you have a choice between like reaching for the guy's legs to keep him in front of you, or like building up on your hands, both of which expose you to guillotine chokes, or you tuck up in a ball and he runs around to your back. Like Gleison Tibau versus Tony Ferguson. You have a dilemma, and both options are pretty shit compared to if you pick up a single leg and the guy, you start losing it, you just go, oh, well, don't want that anymore. You let go of it. It's a lot easier to just do that. Or, a nice high crotch or head outside single. Those are easy to pick up, and you can get punished for them, but if you don't like lean over and keep chasing them, if you just drop it, you're normally okay. But I also want to say, like, it's not... Yes, that had to do with context, but also there were some real signs of improvement in Sandhagen too. We said, like, last time with the TJ Dillashaw stuff, he heel-hooked him from the bottom and blew out his knee. But this time, Jan actually got a hook in and was going to take the back, and Sandhagen jumped across and freed himself and turned back into him to come up on top, which is really dope shit. If you watch Jan versus that big Korean lad, what was his name? I called him the Korean Zombie's roommate the other day because that was basically what they were billing him as. They were like, we don't expect him to win, but he's a friend of the Korean Zombie, and the Korean Zombie says he's game. But yeah, that guy got a hook in on Jan, and Jan did a little half roll forward and then rolled back to land in half guard on top of the guy. Let him fall off the top of him. Those are good things. Like, they take some experience to do. The king of it was Joey B. If you watch Joe Benavidez, a lot of his grappling is like, oh, no, I've given up my back. Quick roll over. Oh, now I'm on top. How'd that happen? He was very good at it. Like, he'd let guys put one hook in and he'd roll into top position into like a backsliding pass. Or you can watch the great roll between Keenan Cornelius and Marcelo Garcia. Marcelo Garcia, a king-level back-taker, amazing back-taker, the greatest back-taker in the sport for a very long time. Gets the seatbelt on Keenan. Keenan does a little roll forward and jumps across him and ends up on top. And it's all narrated by Keenan too, which is pretty cool. But yeah. There was also a really cool little sequence where, I think it was off that, where Jan did exactly what Khabib did in his few seconds on the bottom in his UFC career. Used the octopus underhook, which is, okay, so you're in front of someone, you reach your right hand around to their right side. So you bring your right hand across and around behind them and you reach for like their back pocket. That's the octopus underhook. It's like a wrong side underhook, a reverse underhook, some people call it. But the octopus underhook is dope because you can threaten the back take, and it's just it almost never works out that way. But guys use it to scramble up quite well, and Jan used it here against Sandhagen, and they both ended up with the octopus underhook chasing each other's backs, and Jan managed to turn him around and get on top. Very cool. Very cool. So overall, I think a terrific fight. Corey being real as hell afterwards, just saying like, yeah, no, he definitely won. But next time I'll try and do better. But I think that it's a fight where, yeah, I would love to see them meet up again down the road. See if Corey can move some stuff around and try and prioritize certain things more and make Jan's fight more uncomfortable. That knee, the replay of the jumping knee, which we were all like, that'll be interesting at least, because Jan always has the goalposts up with the high forearms guard, and he's considerably shorter, and Corey just likes to hop up and hit him in the chin with the knee. And he did, and Jan was just like, hey, don't knee my face. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see them meet up down the road. Obviously, you got the unfinished business with Sterling for Jan. Very strange. Like, the UFC's Twitter account was like, that's the second jewel in his belt, which firstly, I forgot we were doing jewels in belts. Pretty lame. But it does beat being like, oh, Demetrius Johnson, 13-time UFC champion. You're like, no, 1-time UFC champion with X defenses. Because he had like 13 belts because they make a new one for each fight. I think that's why they got rid of him. He wasn't even making the money back as a draw that they were spending on making the belts. But the announcer at the event also said like, oh, this is his second title. And he's like, no, it's the interim title, isn't it? What's going on? But it's all bollocks, really, So the rest of this card, what did I like? We'll do all the Dagestani setups. No, there was a couple of really good ones in here. I mean, there were, obviously, when they put Chimaev in against Li Jingliang, I said at the time, like, I don't rate Li Jingliang very highly. People will after this fight because it's one of those things where they go like, well, he beat consistent top 5 contender Li Jingliang. I pissed off a lot of people with facetious tweets about this fight. Like, hey, why don't you give sincere opinions in, is it still 140 characters? However long, like one sentence at a time to make myself laugh. Like, if you're getting angry at me about tweets because I didn't give you a full analysis of the fight, get fucked, loser. Listen to the podcast. No, obviously this was impressive. Honestly, like, this fight, the only thing that it really told me was that Chimaev still, well, at least in the first round, he's still Chimaev, which is nice because, again, we are still wondering about the effects of, like, long COVID on some of these fighters who've had it really bad. Volkanovski one was a massive relief, watching him just go from strength to strength over 5 rounds. But, they were talking about this guy retiring a few months back, so it's great to see him recovered. The shot was so fast. I've been watching a load of his wrestling. Someone put up a clip of him getting 2-on-1, which is a form of arm control, which sets up some nice shots. But he got 2-on-1 in this wrestling match, and he puts his other hand to the mat and just, like, does a one-handed cartwheel over the guy's head. It was fucking incredible. Clearly the guy is an incredible athlete. Like, there are people now who are like, he could take Usman's belt tomorrow. And I'm like, well, I've seen Usman beat a lot of really good guys. I'm not ready to jump that far with these sort of conclusions. But fuck it, if they want to do that fight, we are at the point where it's, Usman's fought so much lately, and they've not really sorted out the next contender. They clearly don't want Leon Edwards to fight for the title, so they're doing the Edwards-Masvidal fight. We don't want to see Masvidal fight him a third time. They're doing Colby this weekend, so that'll either be decided or they'll have a third. Gilbert Burns already lost very convincingly. Stephen Thompson got beat by Gilbert Burns, so can't get that title fight. So yeah, really, like, why not just have this guy jump in? I mean, I'd like to see him fight another guy first, maybe, but whatever. The great part was, like, Neil Magny has been saying that, yeah, I'd love to fight this guy from the start. And after the fight, he was like, yeah, I'd love to fight him. And MMA fans are like, why? So you can get fucked? What? You're complaining everyone's ducking him, and then someone offers to fight him, and you're like, you'll lose, though. Like, what? Yes, obviously he knows that he could lose. I mean, Neil Magny's incredibly chill about that stuff. Neil Magny is the guy who fought Damian Maia, got absolutely mugged on the ground, and then when Damian Maia was in Vegas or wherever Magny lives, doing a seminar, Magny tweeted him up like, do you mind if I come? And he was sincere, and Maia was like, I'd love you to. And then they had all these photos of them together afterwards. What a cool guy. And he, very real. Will fight pretty much anyone. Do I think he beat Chimaev? No, well, see, this is the thing. I think Chimaev is a much better wrestler than him. He could end up in an awful position like that very early on and get choked out in the first round. But Magny's got real staying power, and that's the sort of thing that you do want to see tested in Chimaev. I don't want to see him finish the same guys over and over again in one round. I want to see him demonstrate that, like, when he meets someone who can stop him doing that and keep him around a little bit longer, he won't just fold up like a flan in the cupboard. Actually, this brings me on to Amir Khani, because I was saying it's a great idea to have Amir Khani on the same cards as people like Islam and Habib, because I feel like when you're watching people like Islam and Habib do it almost effortlessly, it seems, you need to be reminded that this is really hard work, being on top of people, driving a pace, smushing them into the mat and trying to finish them all turns. Because Amir Khani looks like them for one round and then just doesn't immediately afterwards. But sorry, we'll return to Chimaev for a second. Like, this is the thing. Like, yes, he beat a good name. A top, is he top 15? Whatever he is. But, and yes, the shot was really fast and the control was incredible. But equally, like, Li Jingliang, not incredibly hard to take down. And then he came out and threw a 1-2 literally off the bat. I mean, I tweeted about this facetiously afterwards, but it's absolutely true. I think if you're fighting Chimaev next, and you know that he wants to finish quickly, maybe don't just square up and throw a right hand at him right off the bat. Because 1, he'll counter you with a punch like fucking Gerald Meerschaert. Or 2, he'll dive on your hips, and your hips will be squared and your arms will be out extended, and he will be on your hips and have a free takedown. That was a dope-ass level change, but the way that Lee had set himself up to deal with it was, non-existent. He had no layers of defense left because he'd thrown himself into trying to spark the guy on the first 1-2 of the fight. And if you don't know the difference that squaring up to throw a right hand makes to your takedown defense, go and watch Fedor versus Bigfoot, because Bigfoot outweighs Fedor by 60, 80 pounds. Fedor is washed. Fedor's throwing right hand after right hand, one at a time, which is like, I said this the other week, but like even old Fedor, when he's throwing combos, he looks pretty fucking slick. But he does just have these random fights where he's throwing one right hand at a time, especially when he's panicking. But in that fight, Bigfoot Silva spent the entire first round ducking in on Fedor, pushing him to the fence, trying to pull him over. And Fedor, 80 pounds lighter, is like, no, my judo hips and my booty shorts are not letting you take me down, even off the fence, even though I've spent none of my career dealing with a fence. And then the second round, Bigfoot Silva just goes, oh, he's throwing the right hand literally every time that we're standing in front of each other. So he just ducks under it and takes him down, like, effortlessly. And Bigfoot Silva's shot is arse. Go watch that fight. It'll fucking clear up. Like, don't lead with the right hand straight off the bat against people who want to take you down. But yeah, Chimaev, whatever next for him. Looking forward to it. Now on to Islam Makhachev, who, again, yes, super talent, and fought Dan Hooker. I said this impressed me more than like an RDA or a Tony Ferguson fight would. I think RDA would survive longer on the ground, but I don't think he'd do anything interesting on the feet. I don't know if his wrestling's that good to, like... I think it'd just be, 3 or 4 rounds of, it would be 3 rounds because it's a non-title fight and non-main event, but he'd just be there losing probably for the entire time. At least with Dan Hooker, you got the interesting striking matchup and a guy who's like in his prime as opposed to a guy who's very much on the downside of his career. This one, I think this was a bit of a brain fart by Hooker throwing the inside low kick. Never been a fan of the inside low kick, to be honest, against, when I say inside low kick, I mean southpaw versus orthodox or orthodox versus southpaw, where you're throwing your rear leg to the inside of their lead leg, because that's a long weapon. And if they step in any closer, like, it's fucked up, it's thrown off. I've seen a few guys get dropped off that in the last couple of weeks. There was that guy against, who was that long Brazilian lad who was winning the first round by kicks, and then the second round he comes out, throws a kick from way too close in and gets dropped. But it's been happening a lot lately. But anyway, he ends up on the mat. I was like, oh, what's he going to do here? Because he got a butterfly hook in. Like, he didn't seem to be wanting to climb the fence, which, is where guys keep giving their backs up. You turn to get up on the fence, and the Dagestani, or whoever's imitating a Dagestani on top of you, takes you back. In this one, Hooker stayed on his back with the butterfly hook, but he'd lost the underhook on the side of the butterfly hook, and Islam Makhachev had a crossface, the arm around his head and the shoulder pressing in, which is like where you pass from. The weird thing was that where we always talk about this, like one of the things that you will see almost every great grappler do in MMA when they're on the bottom is try and clear the crossface, because one, it takes away a lot of the opponent's control. Their chest on your head, turning your head away, keeping you from turning your body in one direction or bridging in one direction. And also, like, if you do clear the crossface, if you get your hand inside of their bicep, or you get 2 hands on that wrist and you push it away, you got space inside to start turning into them and doing stuff. Great example from a grappling match perspective would be Gary Tonin versus Palhares. Trying to think of good ones in MMA. There's been quite a few, but I cannot remember specifics for the life of me. But yeah, it was interesting because rather than trying to get inside Makhachev's cross-facing arm when he was pulling back to punch or something like that, Hooker was trying to lock it to his head, so he's putting his hand behind his own head like he was laying down at the beach to try and lock the hand in place, which ultimately seemed to not really do anything because Makhachev then just passed his hand over to the other side and started attacking the Kimura. But the Kimura, we've said it before quite a lot lately, but finishing Kimuras, pretty hard to do. There's a reason you don't see too many of them. The stats on Kimura finishes in the UFC are really surprisingly low. And you don't see that much in grappling either. The main times you see them are in answer to a takedown or something like that, like using the Kimura trap to set stuff up. Generally, the Kimura trap is better for setting stuff up. You get the guy, you lock him into turning one way and you try and take his back off it, or you attack arm bars and stuff like that. Actually separating the hands and because to finish a Kimura, you have to get the guy's hand from in front of his body to behind his body. under his back. And it can be very hard to finish a Kimura, like even if you get top position, if the guy's hand is underneath him, because there's not a lot of space to push him through. So you have to try and sit him up, which is always really awkward. But Makhachev was able to do it here and secure the finish. I think the ref stopped it before Hooker tapped, but it was in position where Hooker's arm was just going to get busted up if Makhachev continued, and it didn't look like Makhachev was running out of steam on the Kimura attempt. So upsetting for Dan Hooker, good for Islam Makhachev. Jump him into title contention. I suppose I was trying to work out the way to do this, but then, whatever happens, there's going to be some kind of injury that fucks this all up. But we've got Gaethje versus Chandler next week. I would love, because then you've got them both coming off basically the same length of time after fights. You might have to give some allowance, because if the winner of Gaethje versus Chandler gets dinged up during that fight, he'll probably have a medical suspension of some kind, but or a no contact time. But you can have them go into camp about the same time to fight one another, the winner of that fight and Makhachev, which I think would be a great way of deciding who gets next shot at whoever wins between Poirier and Oliveira. But then if Poirier and Oliveira have like an absolute barn burner, and one of them wins in the 5th round or something like that, then we're probably going to want a rematch of that. So basically all of this shit is up in the air. But yeah, Islam Makhachev, always been legit, but now we're getting to the point where I'm like, yeah, fuck it. Just get him in with... Oh, actually, Dariush. I keep forgetting Dariush is in title contention as well. Just get him in with Dariush or someone like that. Sort this division out. We need a line of people who get shots. Actually, while we're on the subject of Dagestanis and getting gimmies, because this was not really a gimme, but Li Jingliang was a bit of a gimme. But a respected gimme, at least. Albert Jurayev got a gimme who... I mean, fucking hell. I said I didn't really know him last time. I checked his fight out. It was not great, the one that he had in the UFC, Roman Kopylov. And you could tell this wasn't going to be great he wasn't going to be great, because their hype package for him had highlights where you were like, was that the highlight? Couldn't pick a better clip than that, lads. So they brought in Jurayev to fight Kopylov, and Jurayev actually looked like trash in this fight. Like, he did well in the end of the first round, I think it was, where he got top position, mounted Kopylov, and did the jerking off the face, which he does a lot, which is like a hammer fist that don't actually leave the surface of the striking target at all, basically. Like, you take it 2 inches away and then you hit him again and it doesn't really do anything. They added a couple of good elbows, managed to break Kopylov's nose. But second round, I think it was, Kopylov sat him down with a left straight, and then in the third round, Kopylov took him down. So, like, Jurayev did win, but he looked crap doing it. So it was really funny, and Kopylov he's never going to be very good, it doesn't seem, but he's my boy. And they were like, oh, he's 3-time world champion in hand-to-hand combat or something like that. And you're like, isn't that this? That's what this should be called. Kopylov, try to remember the basics of CQC. But the other Dagestanis on this card, Magomed Ankalaev, who, had the steam taken off him by Paul Craig for what seemed like an unjustifiably long amount of time, given that he'd lost 1 second of his UFC career. But yeah, he fought Volkan Ozdemir, and it was kind of like a classic Ozdemir performance, like good technical all-round stuff, and then lost confidence because he got shaken a little bit. His confidence in his chin seemed shot. But Magomed Ankalaev's boxing looked sharp. Ozdemir was doing great work with the low kick, though. Like I said at the start of the third round, Ankalaev's lead leg looked like tiger bread. He was marked up and down it. And it was just nice because it was two guys who could actually fucking go at light heavyweight. I think it was in the third round, Ankalaev hit a takedown. Ozdemir immediately built up and was fighting up, elbow back in, turning into him. It was just, that doesn't normally happen. Light heavyweight fights, when they hit the mat, it's normally a shit takedown and then a shit slog on the mat. It's nice to just see them fighting like, a good division. But yes, Ankalaev moves forward, Volkan Ozdemir moves backwards. Very weird takes coming out about this, like people being like, well, Ozdemir's Bellator already now. And then Zubaira Tukhugov fought Ricardo Ramos. This one was good. I really enjoyed this. Ramos didn't arse around doing like Rabona kicks. The first round, I thought this was going to go much worse for Ramos because Tukhugov hit him with a couple of good right straights. And Ramos started like pulling away from the punches, but not in the, yes, I'm pulling away from these punches sort of way, in the that sort of flustered moment where you start acting like you would if you weren't in a fist fight and something was hitting you. Go, oh no, get it away from me, Ramos is a good fighter. I've seen him duck into clinches. I've seen him pull and counter. I've seen him slip things. I've seen him, well, in fact, he did. When he got his confidence back, he turned into a back elbow when this guy was closing on him. It's been his move. He's very good at letting guys come onto him, ducking in and turning into the back elbow. Knocked out Ayman Zahabi with that, didn't he? But in that first round, he looked very flustered. He was just sort of like running away from the punches. Second round was better. Third round was also better. Tukagov probably deserved the win. Ramos was doing things like shoulder rolling, but in a way where his head was very high. And this is an interesting thing because like the shoulder roll, some people do teach it very upright. But one of the issues, particularly with the smaller gloves in MMA, is that the guy, if he throws a big, particularly with the punching form in MMA, the guy throws a big winging overhand, maybe like he wants to catch you with his wrist behind your head. You can still get cracked if you're standing very tall like that. A lot of the time with shoulder rolling, it's best to get down behind the shoulder a little bit. Take your head offline slightly as you turn. Dustin Poirier style. Someone else was fucking shoulder rolling with their rear shoulder on this card, and I really liked it. Cannot remember for the life of me who it was. Certainly wasn't Volkov or Tybura. But I was getting Jersey Joe flashbacks. There you go, I said it. Have your drink for the Jack Slack bingo. But yeah, I like Tukagov. He looked good. Proper weird that he's still in the UFC, though. I mean, that's the drawing power of the Dagestani set. Because what he did to Conor McGregor was far worse than what Paul Daly did to Josh Koscheck. Objectively. We all know Conor McGregor's a dickhead, but objectively, it was worse to sucker punch a guy who's just lost a fight than it was to sucker punch a guy who just beat you in a fight. Let's do the controversy here. Zaleski versus Sandhagen with his weird-ass Knights Templar tattoo. Zaleski's weird, man, because when he fought the Leech, that's a good fight for the Leech, actually, because the Leech made Zaleski look like crap. Zaleski looked like he hadn't boxed a day in his life. Salakov's fight was proper weird, too. They just didn't really do much at each other. But this fight, Zaleski looked good, competent. Not quite the form he was on when it was like he was on a 3-fight finishing streak, like an 8-fight winning streak, and he was just wheel kicking people constantly. But the first round, like, this guy did good. Because I was saying, like, why was this fight made? Because there doesn't seem to be a cancellation, and Benoit Saint-Denis had done nothing special outside the UFC, and Zaleski is a known quantity and a competent name, and, probably top 25 sort of guy in the UFC. So it was a weird fight to make, but Saint-Denis did well in the first round. His level changes and takedowns looked nice. He was going even on the feet. And then in the second round, he just got dinged. He kept taking front kicks to the body, and late in the first round, I saw him take one and take a big breather and walk around the cage. And I was like, well, that doesn't bode well. And then in the second round, you just watched all the energy go out of him, and he just took a beating. And this referee, hold on, what was his name? Vyacheslav Kiselev just let him get beaten almost to death. And this is the thing about these fights. Like, you can take a tremendous beating, but it's always the question of whether you should. Like, should you have taken that beating? Because I don't think he was going to get back into the fight having taken that beating. But it is the sort of thing where, like, Zaleski got tired beating him up. Now, Zaleski didn't get tired enough that he was going to fall over like Homer Simpson's opponents. But he did get tired enough that he was like, okay, this guy might make it through the fight. Because Zaleski just took the third round off, basically. But it's still not good to let your man take that much damage. We're blaming the ref, but the corner also has to take some responsibility there too. Luckily, because this was in Abu Dhabi and the UFC is acting as commission, they were able to just move this ref out and get rid of him. On the other hand, with them acting as commission, it did mean that you got things like Chimaev missed weight, came back 10 minutes later and held the towel for the weigh-in. And they were like, yep, he was 171, now he's 166. And he was walking off stage before someone said, 166, he lost 5 pounds. And then the guy goes, oh no, come back. And they blamed it on a scale malfunction, which is like, the scale is supposed to be really like moron proof. The entire reason they use the analog scale is because it's like harder to diddle with, harder to fuck up. Like you literally just do a little slider until it tips, hence tipping the scale. But like it's just hilarious. I mean, obviously this is them doing their own stuff, but I've seen it with proper commissions. They're paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to regulate these fights, and in sanctioning fees, and they still regularly fall for guys putting their hands on the towel. Like if the guy doesn't come out and do the double bicep flex like everyone does when they're weighing in, be suspicious. It should be a rule that you have to do the double bicep flex. and then we wouldn't have this problem. But they had him weigh in again with his arms above his head, and I think he made 170.5 or something like that. But just the idea that like you could go, oh, he lost 5 pounds, cool, just no questions asked. It's like when Cyborg missed weight by half a pound or something like that, and she went off the stage, barely cleared the back of the stage, and came back on and made weight. People were like, oh wow, how did you do that? Obviously making herself throw up. Like what else are you gonna do? Took a big dump in a waste paper bin. That's what I did. But then every day, like I realize, not realize, but every day I have to explain to someone who doesn't follow this sport why they have to kill themselves a day before fighting. I was explaining to my father-in-law, like, yeah, it's a really good way to get kidney stones. What else was good? Oh, Amanda Ribas versus Vina Jandiroba. This was a fun one. I watched this with the missus because she was waiting for Strictly to come on, so I had to watch the rest of the fights on mute. But that way it counts as couples time. But I was explaining to her that Jandiroba, basically her job is to fight babes in the UFC. They were like, yeah, here you go. Here's Mackenzie Dern. Did she fight Paige Van Zandt? Oh, no, Amanda Ribas just submitted Paige Van Zandt a little while ago. But this was interesting because Jandiroba, I said on Twitter, Jandiroba had the power right hand, the no technique right hand, and Ribas had the no power right hand. But I quite liked Ribas striking this one because after a bit of a rough first round, well, not rough actually, the first round was, she did get dinged with a big right hand, but she was on her back in closed guard, threw up a TP triangle, which is the one where you don't actually lock your foot behind your knee, you just have your feet crossed, like stretched out. And then you grab under your own knees with your hands and lock them together. And you'll see them occasionally, the TP triangle, but I've never seen it like sitting in that position with Vina Jandiroba like on one knee. So I didn't know what to make of it. I was like, that doesn't look in, or is it? It's just I didn't know what to think. Fortunately, I didn't have to think because then Jandiroba got out of it. But Ribas' striking looked decent. She was pressuring her down by the end. Working in combinations. Jandiroba would take a big swing and Ribas would hit her with a shorter right hand on the counter. Didn't look like she had a lot of power, but Jandiroba was so often so out of position and so gassed by the end of it that she was reacting to it very badly. And she had the big hair, which, as we all know from Olaf Alonso, if you have big hair, the punches look worse than they are. And then I also like Amanda Ribas' back kicks. She was timing those well along the cage. But a decent fight, I thought. Yeah, good for Amanda Ribas. Get back on the winning... is that 2 in a row? Is that a winning streak? Hold on. Because she lost to Rodriguez, didn't she? Oh, no, this is literally the first fight back since Rodriguez. Oh, she looked good then. And she looked more comfortable striking than she did against Rodriguez. But then that's Rodriguez. I would feel more comfortable striking Jandiroba than Rodriguez, to be honest. And then we're on to the prelims. Mikhail Oleksijuk. I said, what year is this? Because I've been impressed by Oleksijuk. In 2019, I think it was, he knocked out like Jan Vellante, bum, and Tigulov, also bum. Those guys are like a combined 0-8 in their last 8. Those wins didn't age very well, but then he lost to Avin Simprou and Jimmy Crute, but then he beat Matestas Bukakas by split decision in his last one. So I was like, not super hype on this, but they took on Gamzatov, who was undefeated, 14-0, and was a Dagestani fella. So, the kind of guy they want to win in Abu Dhabi. And Oleksijuk looked great. He backed him up to the fence, pressured him, hit him in the body. He's one of those southpaws who uses the long, wide left to the body, or the long left uppercut to the body, which... when I watch it, I go, oh, that's so dangerous. But it's really cool when you see guys do it well. If you can get in and pull your head away in time, or get in and level change, or get in and press to the clinch or whatever, as Oleksijuk was doing, works really well. And the problem was that Gamzatov was backing himself on the defense, and he was not able to throw in combinations back. So you saw Oleksijuk had this absolute confidence in just, he was rear shoulder rolling. That's who it was. It was very cool. But he had this absolute confidence in getting away from whatever was coming back, because he was never made to second guess. There was never more than one coming back. It was always Gamzatov loading up and being like, this will get me out of trouble. When really, that's the sort of situation where you're like, okay, poke, bang, if you can see that the guy's just going to move his head after every punch, try and get him to move his head before you let off the big banger. But yeah, Oleksijuk working the body wonderfully, and then he was working the body and mixing the long uppercut to the body with what looked like the long uppercut to the body, but then it would come up the middle, it'd be an uppercut to the head, and the uppercut to the head was what finished the fight. Lovely stuff. Very impressed. I imagine his next one will not be as impressive. Like when he meets good guys, he tends to fall apart. But Yeah, good on him. Honestly, if this is a move towards more pressure fighting from him, I'd really like that because he's got very quick hands and good accuracy. Then Amirkhani versus Leroy Murphy. We touched on this briefly, but Amirkhani ragdolls him for the first round. But Murphy did well. He was never. He was positionally dominated, but he was never in danger. Like, he never really got hit very hard. He never was put close to being submitted or even attacked with a convincing submission attempt. And second round, he comes out. His corner were very interesting because they said when you're southpaw, he doesn't want to wrestle. When you're orthodox, he suddenly gets very interested in it. And I watched him, and he came out and he switched to southpaw. And Amirkhani's also southpaw. So when he was closed guard, which you'd think would be when Amirkhani goes for it, but Amirkhani tends to go for single legs on orthodox fighters. But yeah, he went southpaw, and Amirkhani looked really offset for a second. And then Amirkhani went to shoot, and Leroy Murphy showed him like a fake knee, or like a knee that he didn't commit to. And then they did it like 2 more times, and then Amirkhani shot anyway, and he kneed him anyway. Well, I wouldn't have done it. I'd have been like convinced that something different was coming then, because like, why would you do the same? Why would you show the same thing 3 times and then do it a 4th? But good for Leroy Murphy. Read him like a book. Yeah, very impressive. Because this guy just knocked out Ramos. He's on a great little run. I'm surprised he's not getting more attention because he's also finishing people. And then the other one that I liked was Nascimento versus Ulanbekov, and this one I did think that this was a bit of an Abu Dhabi decision, because I thought Nascimento, like, Ulanbekov was on top the entire time, or most of the time, and DC was like filleting him for this. DC was terrible this event, by the way, but then, what's new? In fact, I'm going to look into, because I've got nothing going on Saturday, I'm going to look into trying to stream or broadcast a live commentary for some of the fights. I won't do all of them because that'd be fucking exhausting, but I will try and find a way to do that. Maybe Twitch. I don't know if Twitch is the best way for audio stuff because it'll be like a live podcast instead, I suppose. But I'm going to look into that. No promises, but I am genuinely looking into it. And then, so this fight was Alan Nascimento attacking constantly with submission attempts, and they weren't half-assed. He was attacking the entire time, making this guy react and respect him. And it doesn't even matter if they weren't close, which they were, some of them were, but even if you still were like, well, it doesn't count unless he's actually hurting his arm with the submission, at the point where the guy has to like freak out to get out of it. Nascimento was attacking. Ulanbekov was doing nothing except defending. He was he didn't get to throw punches or anything from the top position because he was in defense mode the entire time. So crap decision, but very convinced by Alan Nascimento. That is a fun fucking fighter. And you got to see the Kimura trap in action tons too. The half guard Kimura spinning over the top, doing like what Robert Deagle calls the arm saddle. That was a Little Nog specialty back in the day. He basically sort of pioneered that in MMA, getting the Kimura from half guard and then stepping over the top and making it into an armbar. And Lachlan Giles caught Raniaya, of all people, with that in EBI. Anyway, we basically got an hour now. That was a really good event. I had a lot of fun doing that. For all the people who were always like, oh, Jack, you only have a moan, that was terrific. And on the Boycast, I was very excited about this. And on this week's Boycast, I'm going to be getting very excited about UFC 268, which looks absolutely fantastic, except that they've snuck Gian Vellante in there. But another reason it looks fantastic is because there's only one women's MMA fight on it, and it's the 2 best in the world in the best division. So, it's bangers all the way down aside from that. I love it. Oh, and Alex Pereira is taking an MMA fight with 4 MMA fights under his belt against number 74 in the world, apparently, middleweight. But there's loads of stuff. We're going to talk all about that on the Boycast in a couple of days. If you want to get in on the Boycast, support the podcast, read the articles and all the other stuff, sign up to the Patreon. If you want to send an email to the podcast, jackslackpodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to see what I'm writing anytime, fightprimer.com. If you haven't watched the Filthy Casuals Guide to Piotr Yan, get on that because I'm going to have to take it down soon because I don't like to keep them up too long. I'm your boy Jack Slack, and I'll catch you next time. Not knowing if the fighters are picking up Hasbulla because they don't know that he's an adult or because they're just that friendly with him, bless.